Hello and welcome to Behind the Message. My name is John Hughes, and we just finished filming the 4th week of the book of Philippians. And I'm here today with Carrie Lattiser, our teaching pastor for the day. And it's good to be here with you, and took a lot of notes of the talk that you gave, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit.
It's great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I got to say, I kind of was nerding out a little bit on all the brain stuff that you mentioned, and we have a limited amount of time, so I just want to ask a couple things about that. The first would just be, what kind of good news does neuroplasticity have for us as Christ followers? You know, as we try to live into this kind of life that you spoke about today.
Yes. I'm so glad you asked, because we had to take a whole bunch of my geeky brain stuff out of the manuscript, so now we can unpack all of it
yes,
here
you get
together.
to talk about it, yes.
Okay, so really I've been just so curious about like neuroplasticity and kind of psychology and science and emotional health and how these things even shape discipleship and what it means to follow Jesus and to try to live into this kingdom way. And I think neuroplasticity is great news because, one, I think it means there's a path to healing, to experiencing healing, whether that's from trauma or addiction or just pain. Like neuroplasticity plays a role in that. And I think it gives us hope that there's potential for change and transformation, which is like a big part of the good news of what it means to follow Jesus and experience flourishing life. But it's really this idea, we have programming of how our brains tend to function, or maybe how we tend to react or respond in particular situations. And it's the wisdom of our brains and the wisdom of our bodies that show up in that way, because it's based on kind of past experience, the home we grew up in, the primary condition of your nervous system throughout your life. And obviously that's shaped in healthy and unhealthy ways. And so somebody that wants to reorient maybe those patterns when it comes to addiction or pain, or maybe they have a fear of connection because they were hurt in relationship, or, all of us carry these challenges around, and neuroplasticity means that we can reorient those things, those patterns. We can change those kind of neural pathways in the brain. And I think that's remarkably good news, because that can lead us, into life that is flourishing.
Yeah, it seems like you can name what's going on.
Sure.
Right, we can name it and then learn some new practices that help us develop some new practices.
Totally. And the new practices, that's kind of the outflow. But then the internal thing is that you're actually repatterning your brain and how it experiences the world, and what your first thought or what your initial reaction will be because of how those patterns or practices can change the patterns. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that you said at the very beginning was you used the analogy of the Colorado River, right? And all those incremental changes.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So this is not a thing where, I'm just going to do one thing and it's going to change and I'm going to be all better, and it didn't work, so I failed, right?
Totally.
There's actually some comfort in knowing that this is like an incremental, like regular thing. Yeah. Sometimes I'm not going to get it right. Other times I am going to get it correctly.
I would be remiss to miss one thing right here, though.
Yeah.
It can change for good or for bad. So the idea is that whatever we take in forms us, not like, I'm going to choose to do these good things in form. So I don't know, if you were sitting at home for a couple of years, like watching, volatile news, it would change your brain. It would change how you may become more cynical or more skeptical of people. So it's good or bad. It's just naming the reality that what we take in, just like that Colorado River, slowly over time etches in, shapes and forms things. So I felt like that was important to name, because everybody's been shaped over the last couple
what
years.
we take in, the decisions that we make based on that, like input, right? So I'm just curious, like you talked a lot about practices that we can engage in when maybe things aren't great, right? Rejoice even when things aren't well.
Sure.
And I'm just curious, just from your own life, what have been some incremental choices that you've made, things that have over time added up to a difference in your life?
Physical practices and kind of spiritual practices come to mind. And I'll even begin sharing about them by saying, I think that sometimes we want to change. And so it's like, change everything, like throw away the junk food in the cabinet. Monday morning, and I have just found for me actually incremental changes. Like every year I kind of evaluate like, what's one physical thing that I can do? Like flossing my teeth. And so I decided one time, like, I'm going to start flossing my teeth, and I'm going to do this regularly as a practice because I know there's long-term benefits.
Yeah.
So for me, it's evaluating regularly, like, what's one tiny little thing that I can do, because I have found in my own journey that's just more sustainable than kind of the overhaul change. But from a spiritual practice standpoint, there's this ancient practice of the prayer of examen.
Okay.
And I think I've even talked about it maybe on Behind the Message before, but really it's like the end of the day. For me, that was when I did it. And it's kind of a reflective thing where you play back your day and you think about, like, and you're kind of inviting God into that. Where did I experience you? God, where were you at work and I missed it because I was too busy on my own agenda? Who do I need to go back and apologize to? And over time, and I mean over years, it actually began to change how I interacted in the moment. Because I would kind of see what my tendencies were of missing God at work or missing an opportunity to connect with somebody. And then over time, it calibrated me in the moment, like, oh, instead of missing this, I'm actually going to enter in. So that has been one of the most significant kind of spiritual practices for me, is just that stop and reflection and allowing the Spirit to kind of reveal to me where I blew it or where the Spirit's working.
Yeah, that makes me think of something else that you said in the talk. I was struck by the fact that in the section where you talked about being gentle, I think it was the second practice.
Yes.
I was just noticing that a large portion of that section of the talk was really internally focused, like paying attention to yourself. And it just struck me that part of the way that we are gentle with other people is would you say we're learning to be gentle with ourselves? And how does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, the more I have gotten into kind of studying this and learning this, you can only be as gentle with another person as you are with yourself. And so often I would say all the time, how we treat other people is a reflection of our own worlds, not how we feel about them. Yeah. So learning that, like, oh, this person who's being disrespectful or this person who's being volatile or whatever you're experiencing from somebody else, what's happening is way more about them than it is about you in that moment. And so until we can actually experience self-compassion for the times that we totally blow it as humans, or even just the little times that we miss the mark, that's the only way we can extend that to other people. And so when we like judge other people or beat up other people, in our minds or call them names or whatever, most of the time that's like internalized stuff that we just have not gotten in touch with.
So would you say then that's like we would beat somebody else up with our words because we're used to beating ourselves up with our own words?
Totally. When we can't extend self-compassion or grace to our own selves the way that God does, we have no capacity to extend that to other people. So go ahead.
So things like the examine, prayer of examine, and just thinking through your day, playing through that, seeing your responses and thinking through those emotions help you be more gracious to yourself and offering those to God.
And we talk about like that Jesus tells us the greatest thing, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. But we don't talk about what it means to love ourselves or to grow. I mean, so often that's even how I hear from the Holy Spirit, is growing in self-awareness. And I think the church has a lot of room to grow. We have a lot of room to grow in our discipleship in that way. And it was a counselor who said those words to me. If you want to call somebody a name or give them a hand gesture, it's actually not about the consequences for them. It's about what you're doing to your insides by allowing yourself to do that, to mar the image of God in somebody else or diminish them in your own mind. And that's actually the work, right? The internal work that we have to do. And it blew my mind, but it stuck with me. And I think about it often, that I'm harming myself as much as I'm harming somebody else.
So how we treat ourselves is how we're going to treat other people. That's really really good. So what kind of encouragement would you give maybe somebody who's listening, who's maybe tried some of these practices and feels like, oh man, I've tried these things, but I haven't seemed to notice a difference. Like when's it gonna make a difference in my life, my everyday life? What would you say to them?
I would say maybe even just have the courage to choose one, maybe incorporating, lots of different practices at one time. Again, that can get overwhelming, and then you're like chained to the practice instead of experiencing with the fruit of it. And so I would say pick one and pick a time that you're going to commit to it to, 60 days or 30 days or, long enough that you're going to get to experience some sort of fruit from it in your life. And then remember that you are worthy of that kind of care. You're worthy of taking the time. You deserve that, and it's good for you, and it will make you better for everybody else that you interact with. So do whatever you need to do to prioritize whatever that practice is. And I really do believe that they would experience God in new ways through it.
So invest in yourself in such a way that you will be, in the end, investing in other people. Don't try to change your life all at once.
Totally.
Right? Just take one little bit at a time
Yeah.
and work at that at some sort of defined time frame.
Yeah.
And then we start seeing fruit from that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we're being formed by everything. So choose what's going to form you, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what we're doing, is trying to be really intentional about that.
Okay. Great. Carrie, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks.
And thank you for tuning in to Behind the Message. If you would like more information about community, you can go on our website at communitychristian.info. We'll see you next time. You can find out more information about community by visiting communitychristian.org/info. .info.
Or
communitychristian.info.
it's just communitychristian.info.
Yes.
There's no org.
Did I
Do
say
you want-
org?
Yeah.
You did.
Okay.
You said
/info.
.org.